today he's going to come with a new topic that, again, not that many people figured out. Some of those egg-scattering fish that group spawn and you can never make yourself, but you always see in fish stores. We're going to focus on the Paracheirodons. Everyone has them, or you have at some point, but you probably haven't bred them. I've accidentally made a single neon before, so it can happen. You know, a group in 50 gallons, they make one extra one, but you'll probably need some more advice if you want to have any success. So here's Ryan.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so hello everyone. I'm really happy to be back here talking about Cardinal Tetras. As you'll see on the titles, I'll also talk a little bit about neons, green neons, and rummy nose tetras in the very back of the presentation, about 10% of it. But overall, I think if you learn how to breed Cardinal Tetras, you're gonna know everything else. It's just a difference in the breeding setups, the water parameters, the way they're raised, it's all the same. So a little bit about me. I run Avatar Aquatics on YouTube. This was something that I did kind of after college and then throughout my grad school years. Whenever I had some free time, I'd go and film some videos. The actual Cardinal Tetras happened about in 2020, and I'll talk a little bit more about when that was. But my very first purchase was a microscope in high school. You know, worked in my summer job, bought the microscope, and the cool thing is you'll see some of those pictures in this presentation. And then the second purchase was dart frogs, because who doesn't like having a little bit of rainforest in your house? And then the most recent purchase was a dental crown. So I have fallen very far from the original things that I planned to buy. So some of my past breeding projects, we talk a little bit about the Amano shrimp. I think hands down, that's probably my favorite project. It took me years to figure that out. And of course, some Neocaridina, assorted tetras, and I really like South American cichlids, German blue rams, angelfish, basically anything in that sort of area geographically, I really like it. And then, you know, my very first couple of breeding projects was bettas with my dad. So I remember like I was in second grade, third grade, my dad was doing that. And then also a little bit of guppies. So if you guys have bred any of those or are curious about learning how to do that, feel free to come up to me after the presentation. I'm happy to talk about my experience. So today I'm going to briefly walk over the introduction, such as how to source the breeders, because as you'll see, it was a bit of a challenge for me to do that. And then how to condition them, how to tell males from females. Then we'll talk about the breeding setup, what to do, preparing all the water. And then finally, we're going to talk about the egg and fry development. So once you get eggs, what do you do after that? And at the very end, like I said, we'll go over the differences with the other tetras. So the year was 2020. This was like right at the start of the pandemic, right? There were very few resources online about breeding Cardinal Tetras, and neon tetras made up the bulk of what we know. So I took a screen grab of this article written in 2020, How to Breed Cardinal Tetras. And for those of you that are eagle-eyed, you guys can see that this is actually a neon tetra. So for those of you that want to know a little bit more, the neon tetras have that silver belly, and that red is only kind of on the tail end of it, whereas the Cardinal Tetras are a little bigger, and that red extends all the way to the front, to the head. And you know, I think it's important to know the distinction here, because if you're going to the store, a lot of times they're mislabeled, and you might be paying Cardinal Tetra prices for a neon tetra. So my biggest problem was every time I went and brought fish home, they would die within a week. And for those of you that might have ordered online or went to places where the fish had to travel from multiple wholesalers or retailers to the actual store itself, you guys might have noticed that before. A lot of the times the fish come in very weak. So first problem was quality breeders. Now, my friend at the Raleigh Aquarium Society, Gerald Potter, actually ended up telling me a tip where the day that you have your fish come in from the mail or you bring them home, Make sure you have some live baby brine hatched out and ready to go so that once they go into their community tank, a few hours later, you feed the baby brine, give them a really nice boost of energy. So that is sort of the weird little creature you see up on the right here. This is a baby brine shrimp under the microscope, about a day and a half old. Hobbyists are a good place to get Cardinal Tetras. The problem with that is no one wants to get rid of their Cardinal Tetras. It's more of a seller's market, so it's very hard to get Cardinal Tetras there. You can get them from online retailers. Look for ones that like to quarantine their fish first or have the shipping guarantees. It's usually pretty competitive pricing. You can check your local fish stores, but kind of like the Petco and the big box stores, they're rarely, if ever, in stock because as soon as they come in, they kind of get bought up. It's a seller's market out there. So for me, I ended up getting all my brood stock from these 3 different sources. I kind of had to collect them over a couple of months as I saved up and bought more fish. Because again, this was during my grad school years, so pocket change was a little. I had to dig under the sofa for that stuff. So the timeline of breeding, most of the stores will sell young juveniles, 2 to 4 months old, and you really want to put them in a larger tank, a 20+ gallon. All the fish that we talk about today, the neons, green neons, rummy nose, they can all be kept together. So if you have a big tank, just throw all the tetras in there. You can breed all of them and condition them at the same time. So you raise them with love, and what I mean is like be patient because they're juveniles. No matter how much you feed them, they're not going to breed for you yet. So it really takes a few months of regular feeding, good quality fish food, and we'll talk about what that looks like for my own personal conditioning regimen. But they usually reach sexual maturity within a year or so, depending on how warm the water is, how much you feed, things like that. So this is, once you get your brood stock, I call this the second phase. So as you're kind of raising up your fish, you're learning how to prepare the water, you collect rainwater. I don't know if Sacramento is like this, but I know in San Francisco, where I now live, there's very little rain. So you can skip this step, use some RO or distilled water, and it's perfectly fine. Find your peat moss. And then also you're learning how to make infusoria, how to hatch baby brine shrimp, and conditioning your fish. And all of this happens before the breeding setup. So here's my little breeding mantra. If there's one thing that you guys remember from this talk, just these 2 sentences here. It's a small, timid fish, and that is kind of the big thing when you're setting up your breeding tank. You want to give them some privacy. They like to be very far away from like human disturbances when they're breeding. So wrap your tanks with some sort of cloth or paper or newspaper. It helps give them that privacy. They're egg eaters, so you want to put something that prevents the eggs from being found by the parents. They're group breeders. Group breeding is way better than a pairwise, and they spawn in soft acidic water. So I'll also go over that and how to prepare this. Okay, so let's talk about my conditioning regimen. This starts, a couple months after I have my breeders. I feel like they're big enough. They look like adults. And how do I get them into prime breeding condition? Well, in the morning, I usually feed flake or pelleted foods. This is good for like an all-around nutrition. And also, I usually wake up about 30 minutes before I'm supposed to head out to school or to work. So not a lot of time to be, filtering baby brine shrimp. And so the baby brine happens in the afternoon. I feed the live baby brine then. I try to hatch it out as often as I can, usually every day or every other day, just to get the nice, nutritious meal in the afternoon. Before lights off, sometimes I'll feed frozen bloodworms. That's totally optional. I haven't really noticed a difference, but since I had it on hand, I'll feed that. This is my brine shrimp hatchery. It's just an inverted water bottle, a normal size one. I've got a airline going through, and I taped the top to the inside of my fish tank. This was during the winter while I was conditioning them, so I didn't want to have to put another heater inside there, but keep it like normal aquarium temperatures that you would keep your tropical fish at, and I feel that the eggs hatch within a day and a half. I use the Aquarium Co-op baby brine. I use the Aquarium Co-op baby brine shrimp. I feel like it has really good hatch rates, and I really like the separation. So once you stop the airline, you'll see all the babies at the very bottom. You can take a turkey baster, suck it up, put it through a mesh or a filter, and then just feed that. The cysts will stay at the very, very top, and I really like that separation. They're really good eggs. So the big question I always get is, Ryan, how long do I condition these tetras for? And there's really no rhyme or reason. Really, for me, it's just you feed until you can accurately tell the males and females apart. So if you go online and you look things up, they might say 2 weeks, 3 weeks. For me, I just keep feeding them that nice diet until I can tell the males and females apart. So how do you tell males and females apart? There's a couple of different ways. I'll go through two. And the first one is I like to call the bird's eye view. So you got to catch out your fish. You put them in a little container. You watch them swim around. And let's zoom in here. The males, if you think about it like a sandwich, the males are the two on the outside. They're smaller. They're less colorful. The lines are straight. And what I mean by that is these little blue lines here, they're way more straight compared to the females. And they have something called an anal fin hook. And you're never ever going to notice that. You're not going to be able to see that inside the aquarium. The only way you ever see it is if you have one of those really fine mesh nets that you catch fish with. And sometimes when you're transferring them from different places, they'll get caught by that anal fin hook. So any of the fish that happens, you know it's a male. It's a proven male. They're thinner, and sometimes you'll also see some chasing behavior as they start to get ready to breed. And then with the females, it's all the opposite. Most importantly, they have curves. So you see that nice red on the bottom here. The females will have that. And this is despite feeding very, very well. The males won't have that. And if you're kind of confused, feed, wait a couple hours, and then check. And if they're still kind of ballooned up like this, that's a female. So knowing everything that we talked about just now, if you're looking at this, the lines out here are very, very curvy, and so that is a definite female. Here's a secret for the people who are here today. If you don't want to catch your fish, I know Cardinal Tetras are kind of hard to catch. I like to dive into the soil and the substrate. So just go at night. Cardinal Tetras are really cool in the way that sometimes during the day, the top pictures are all females. The bottoms are all males. And during the day, these look exactly the same. If you go at night, they lose all that red coloring and they're very, very transparent. So if you guys look at the circle here, you see that peach color at the very back, right after all their intestines and their guts. Same with this one here. That peach color is the unfertilized eggs inside of their body. The males on the bottom don't have that. You'll just see kind of the swim bladder after the sort of silvery lining of their abdomen. So go at night, take a flashlight. You'll kind of spook them, but that's okay. You can get a nice count. Just really what you're looking for is, of your group of Cardinal Tetras, do you have both males and females? I find that the ratio doesn't matter as much as just having both males and females. They're group spawners, so you might, with 10 fish, you're almost guaranteed both males and females. So I know a lot of people are curious about water parameters. Here, this is my community tank where I'm doing all of the conditioning. I'm raising up the fish this way. And then this is my spawning tank. And the blue down here is what's different, right? Of course, a little less nitrate because there's no plants in the spawning tank. I'm not fertilizing anything. My pH is much lower in the spawning tank, and I'll talk about how I do that. KH, GH should ideally be at 0. Now, one of the things that came up in yesterday's talk is like, why do I change the parameters? Why not just keep, all the cardinals in the spawning tank for their entire life? And the reason is this: if you're in a community tank and you have a very high pH compared to the spawning tank, hard water, what that does is it prevents the cardinals from spawning. And so the females get nice and big with all their eggs, and they're not spawning. And then the moment you put them into the spawning tank, they're ready to go. They've got plenty of eggs stored up. And so I actually use the water parameters to sort of prevent them from spawning. Otherwise, because if I were to keep all our tetras in the spawning tank with very soft acidic water, they're just going to constantly spawn for me, and the females are going to lose that vigor. Here are the other materials and things that I like to use. Test strips, I use Tetra Easy strips. It's very, very cheap compared to some of the other ones, and it tells you everything you need to know. a flashlight for looking for eggs and telling the males and females apart. Thermometer. Methylene blue for me is optional. Some people like to use it during the egg stage to prevent fungus from spreading from bad eggs to good eggs. But as you'll see in a second, with Cardinal Tetras and most of these other Tetras, it's really not necessary. Containers, syringe, pipette, turkey basters, or what people will do and what I've done in the past is take a rigid airline tubing and then connect normal, like silicone, flexible airline tubing to the back. So it's a smaller siphon. And I can use that instead of sticking my entire hand in there or a turkey baster and suck up the eggs once they start breeding for me. So if you want to use methylene blue, if you have methylene blue, this is one I use, 1% methylene blue, and I use about a drop per quart of water that I have. So let's talk about the spawning water. You want it 100% very soft water. Don't try to cut it with anything, no tap water. You can use RO, distilled, or rainwater. If you're tired of waiting for rain, distilled water works very, very well. I go to Walmart and I just clear their shelf every time. It's about $1 when I first started per gallon. Now it's probably like $1.50, $1.60. And this is me out here scrubbing buckets because when I first started out, I would take those buckets and I hold a big tarp outside. It was raining, but I quickly found better ways to do it. If are nice and clean, there's no minerals left inside. It comes through, it's all just going to dissolve into your water, and it'd be for no reason. Oops. So let's talk about the peat moss. There's a lot of different options out there, and if you go to a garden store, they're probably going to keep a couple of different ones. The peat moss is great for adding the tannins in the water. Over time, the microorganisms are going to colonize the peat moss, and most importantly, it's going to lower your pH and create that nice acidic water for your cardinals to spawn in, and that is a must. Okay, so this one's at Lowe's. It's about $24 for a bale. It's massive, it's very, very heavy, and it's pure sphagnum peat moss. The important thing when you're picking this stuff out is to make sure that it doesn't contain any sort of fertilizer. So if you look at the Miracle Grow version, and I'm sure they're great for plants, but if you look at the back, in the circle here, it's got all this guaranteed analysis, nitrogen, phosphate, potash, and it is fertilizer. It's added fertilizer. So we don't want to do any of that. Make sure you only have pure peat moss. Now, I did bring a couple of bags of this. I put them on the donation table earlier. These bags are like from this one here, which is the brand I use. It'll treat about 20 to 30 gallons of water. So we'll talk about how we soak that. So if you're planning to do this for a long-term breeding, you want to keep a nice breeding group going, I would prepare about 2 to 2.5 times the amount of water for both your spawning and your fried grow-out tanks. So for example, if you're spawning in a 10-gallon and you got a 3-gallon fried grow-out tank, roughly prepare about 26 gallons of this water that we'll talk about. This is how I do it. I have a 5-gallon bucket, and I just take a handful of peat moss, and I just throw it in there, and I keep a bubbler at the top here, and I just let it sit for a couple weeks. First, it'll cloud up with all that bacteria blooms, and then it's going to slowly kind of turn clear again as things kind of stabilize. If you think about why we're doing this, in the Amazon, where the cardinals are native to, they breed during the rainy season, so there's a ton of water coming down from the sky. It's washing all the minerals away, but there's still a lot of organic matter in the soil. As the trees are losing their leaves, things are falling over, and so that creates the nice humic acid in the Amazon. So we're basically trying to replicate that with the peat moss. And so once we have soaked our peat moss for a couple of weeks, we've got really nice acidic water, still very, very soft. So again, distilled water, peat moss, a couple of weeks. This is our spawning tank. I have 2 types. I like the first one. If you're just kind of getting into things, it's much easier to do compared to the other ones and a lot less maintenance. However, I think the second version that I'll talk about in a little bit will give you a little more eggs over time. So this is a 10-gallon tank. As you'll see, I didn't fill it all the way up just to save on some water. I've got your heater over here. Sponge filter is on this side. Gentle bubbling, so it's not going to disturb too much of the peat moss. Foam board or cover or something to cover all sides of the aquarium. So I only took this off to take the picture, but I've got foam board on each side, including the top. And to stop evaporation, I'll put a glass cover below that foam board. So this is really to just cover up, make sure as little light as possible get in there. I keep a little bit of a crack just so the cardinals know when it's dawn or when it's dusk, and they keep their circadian rhythm. We've got peat moss on the bottom, and then some marbles. This isn't really to let the eggs fall through and the adults from eating those eggs. It's really just to save on the peat moss and to add a little more bulk to that substrate. The good thing about this with a peat moss bottom is the adults get comfortable really quick. They can kind of hide in there when they're tired or when they're stressed out. The fish are rapidly feeling very comfortable and they start spawning really quickly. There's a lot of microorganisms. You'll see the Java moss is over here just to give them a little place to spawn over. And as the eggs fall through, they get hidden in the peat moss. It's very, very hard for you to see the eggs. And so it's also very hard for the fish to see. So it's really good if you want to just spawn once, remove the adults, and just let the babies stay in this little tank as they grow up. Here's my type 2 and what I ended up going with for a long time after this. And so here's a bare bottom tank. It's much easier for maintenance. The spawning mesh that I created over here, I just took, if you go to like Michael's or Hobby Lobby, you can get these crochet meshes. It's plastic material, and I just use fishing line, and I just sew all sides of this, keep it really tight, and I have this like upside down container that I can then invert and put down into this tank. Now you'll see over here, there's a separation between the mesh and the side of the tank. It's hard to see, but from the front and the back, that's also the case. I leave a gap so that the fish won't get stuck between the mesh and the front side of the glass, because Cardinal Tetras like to kind of just wiggle their way into all the different cracks in the tank. So you want to make sure that you're not doing that, because I have found fish trapped in the mornings and they don't make it. You still need your tannin-rich water. So if you're like, I don't really want to make a mess in that bucket by throwing all that peat moss in there, what I do is I'll go get some pantyhose, and I'll double wrap it and make a tea bag with the peat moss inside, tie it off, and just shove it into one of those 5-gallon carboys that you get at your local fish store. And just keep it in there for a couple of weeks. Again, it'll cloud up. You don't need aeration, so just let it soak for a couple of weeks, and then you're good. And it's much cleaner in that way. I still have the sponge filter because it takes a couple of days for the cardinals to start spawning, and you've got your heater. Here's a close-up of what the top of that mesh looks like. Usually there's a lot more moss, but I've just kind of taken that off to show you guys. So the cardinals are going to spawn at the top here, and then the eggs are going to fall through the moss, fall through hopefully past this mesh, and get down below. And so in the mornings when you're checking your egg, you're actually looking at the bottom of the tank. Here's another picture of that. And the only problem is if your sponge filter is set on too high of a flow, what's going to happen is all that moss is going to get washed off from here, and it's going to land over here. It's going to land over here because, of course, that sponge filter is creating a current. There are ways to stop that moss from moving, such as if you take like a lead plant weight that you can fold. You know, if you ever order online or from your local fish stores, a lot of times it comes wrapped in foam, and then that lead plant weight that's bendable, I bend it into a C or a small circle, and I just drop it on top of the moss. And that way, the eggs can still fall through. It's a lot easier in this method to film. So if you like taking pictures of your fish, taking videos of your fish, you could see the eggs. You can actually zoom in with your iPhone. Easy to see. It's very clean. So every morning when you're removing the eggs, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but every morning when you're removing the eggs, you can see exactly where it is. You take your flashlight and you just point it kind of sideways, and you let the light travel this way, and you'll see the eggs glistening because they are transparent, so you're looking for the reflection. There's less microfauna, but the good thing is that these fish can spawn almost every day if you feed them really well. and you can keep those batches going for a couple of weeks before the females kind of tire out. So let's say, okay, you put all the stuff in there, you're ready to spawn, and in the morning, can you see the eggs in this picture, right? So it's very, very hard. I've gone ahead and circled it for everyone here. You've got one really good egg over here. That's probably the most clear one that you can see. Here's another one. And then if you look down here, you'll see an unfertilized egg. And it's white, it's opaque, there's nothing in there, it's not gonna hatch out. But the good thing, the indication is if you do see these white eggs, and there's another one over here, but if you see these white eggs, you know for sure that there was a spawn. Most of the time you'll see the white eggs first, and then you'll see the transparent ones, which are the good eggs. This is what they look like under the microscope. I took those 4 and I went and put them under that microscope I bought in high school. The top 2 are definitely the ones that are fertile. You see the yolk as well as the embryo kind of wrapped around it. And of course, the bottom 2, there's not much going on in there. It is the unfertilized eggs. So big question, why do I recommend group breeding? So neon tetras are pairwise spawners. Why didn't I spawn them as a pair? First, I tried that and it just never worked. So I ended up putting 10 in there. There's about 3 males and 7 females in here. The reason why I do pairwise group spawning is because cardinal tetras are very timid. When they're in a big group, they feel much more comfortable. They spawn much faster. If you're walking through the fish room and they're in this area, they're not hiding as much. And the second thing is more fish, more eggs, right? So how long do the parents stay in the breeding container or the spawning container? Well, 1 week is around the average time that it takes to get eggs. So you're actually having them in there for a whole week, and they have to kind of acclimate to that water before they start breeding. If after 1 week you don't notice any eggs, wait a couple more days, and then you can try a couple of things. First, try some cold rainwater. If you don't have that, take a gallon of that water that you just made, put it into the fridge for a couple hours, and right before the lights turn off in the fish room, or if you keep them in natural sunlight around dusk, go ahead and pour some of that cold water in there. Just kind of trigger like a rain. It feels like the rain is coming down, and make sure your heater doesn't immediately heat that water back up. But if you lower the water a couple degrees, sometimes it can trigger them to breed. If you're in setup 1 and you notice the fungus eggs, which is the white ones that are not fertile, then you know for sure that there's probably some fertilized eggs in there, and you can go ahead and remove the adults. Only in type 1 do you need to remove the adults after the first spawn. In type 2, with the bare bottom tank where you're siphoning out all those eggs, you can just remove the eggs instead of removing the adults. Would you feed them? I do feed them. I feed rinsed baby brine shrimp. So I rinse it with RO water, make sure I'm not adding any minerals into that water. And I feed a little less than normal when I would condition them, just to ensure that not too much detritus collects on the bottom of that tank. Okay, so yes, this is my favorite setup. I think it's just wonderful. And every morning I'll come down, I'll take this up. The adults during this time are going to be scared because I'm working in the tank, so they're not going to be looking at the bottom here. And I feed them baby brine, so they're not too hungry. They're not going to be looking for the eggs. And I just take either a turkey baster like I talked about, or that siphon with the rigid airline tubing, and I'll go ahead and siphon out all those eggs. So let's move on to development. What happens after you collect those eggs? This is my grow out container. It's a 3-gallon cube. You can probably go much higher if you have more fish and more eggs, but I have a sponge filter in the back on low flow. The heater is set to 75 to 80 degrees. They like it really warm. So some people keep them like 82, 85. I've never needed that. 80 is perfectly fine. I have a ton of Java moss just for all the microfauna in there. And the water parameters are exactly the same as the breeding tank. So this is not the time to kind of acclimate them to your community tank waters yet. This is why we made so much water in the beginning. You want to keep them in that very, very soft acidic water. Okay, so this is a free swimming emperor tetra. If you've never bred tetras before, I highly recommend this. The males and females are easy to tell apart. One of them has green eyes, the other one has has blue eyes like the Cardinal Tetra blue, and they'll breed very easily for you. And I spawn them very similarly, and I just have all the tetras growing out in a very, very similar tank. Sometimes they all grow out together. But on day one, I removed the eggs at noon. So some of you guys might hear that like a lot of tetras spawn at dawn in the morning as soon as that sun comes up. With Cardinal Tetras, what I found is that they actually spawn at night. So once that sun goes down, you might get some spawning action at like 11 p.m., 2 a.m. They kind of spawn in little bursts throughout the night. And the eggs are yellow to clear. They're very, very hard to see. We kind of, that little exercise we did with the I Spy kind of shows you how hard it is. But you can either incubate with methylene blue during this time, or if you have peat moss anywhere in your water, and we do have peat moss, you can just skip that methylene blue because they will hatch within a day. So there's not a lot of time for that fungus to attack these eggs. They're still very transparent, and they'll kind of just lay at the bottom of the tank. They won't do much, and they'll look like they're dead, but I promise you they are not. And so you'll see they still have a ton of yolk. That little blue dot over there is not the eye, it's just a speck of dust, but not a lot of things are developing yet. Here's day one. This is the hatched out little babies that look like grains of rice. They're very, very small. Here's a video. I want you guys to focus like down here. I wish we could lower the curtains over there. I don't, because of how bright it is, but against the backdrop of that flashlight, you might be able to see all the babies lined up over here. I'm sure the guys in the front can tell, but it might be a little bit harder to see in the back. Yeah, okay. Cool. So this is day three. You see a lot more structure going on. You can see the individual bands of muscle. Still, the eyes are not fully developed yet. They're still feeding off their yolk sac, so there's still no reason for you to add too much in there. But I'll talk about why it's good to have the infusoria already around day three. And that's because on day four, they look like little baby fry now. They're much more recognizable as fry, and you got the two big black eyes, much less yolk. I think this green thing is probably some sort of digestive fluids going on in their body, but I'm not sure. They also, the cool thing is you see these little blue dots. It's like the color cells that later on are going to give the Cardinal Tetras their color. You can also see the rest of the digestive tract developing, and I don't know if the people in the back can see, but this is starting to shape up into the tail fin, the caudal fin.
What power is your microscope?
I think this is about 100. It could be, it's 40 to 100. I don't remember this particular picture, but it's 40 to 100. So kind of as a review, this is our timeline of breeding. Within a day, the eggs will hatch out. I call it a wiggler to free swimming, like wiggler after the South American cichlids, the angelfish, the German blue rams, but they don't really move like the angelfish do. They kind of just sit at the bottom and they trick you into thinking that they're dead. And I promise you they're not, because if you hit the tank hard enough, they'll get flustered and they'll kind of do a little spin up into the air, and then they'll kind of try to dive down into the peat. It's actually really cute, but try not to stress them out too much. So around this time, we want to add the infusoria into the water because, like I said before, these guys are almost ready to hunt. And you want to make sure there's plenty of food in the water before they're ready to hunt, so that the moment they are, they can find all the infusoria that they need. Because this seems to be the critical stage. If they are finally ready to hunt and there's no food for them, you're going to have a very dramatic drop in yield. So make sure you have infusoria in that free swimming fry tank, in that grow out tank, before they hit day 4. Wait on the baby brine shrimp. They're too small for the baby brine shrimp during this time, so you want to wait about a week, 2 weeks before you start feeding the fish baby brine shrimp. So start off with infusoria for a week or 2. Here's a video of free swimming fry. He's right here, and if you guys look at here, it is sort of out of focus right now, but once that video starts playing, you'll see him kind of zoom around like this. So this is an older looking fry, and it's about a week, 2 weeks, and this is brand new, probably about 4 or 5 days old. Okay. You guys see that? Oh, and there's another one over here. And we got some more over here. There's some more in the back. One just swam through. There's another one over here. Okay, so during this stage, and the reason why I have this video is I wanted to tell you guys about, if you think about it, there are older fry and there are younger fry in there. So when you're feeding, instead of doing infusoria for a week and then stopping the infusoria and feeding the baby brine from then on, you don't want to do that. You want to overlap the infusoria and the baby brine so that the younger fish still are able to eat the paramecium, the rotifers, the microfauna, as the older fish are now snacking on the baby brine shrimp. So kind of don't cut off the rest of the younger fry just to start feeding the baby brine shrimp, okay? Because then you'd be wasting a lot of time. Here's a picture of another free swimming fry. You can see the little swim bladder and the nice little eyes. They're really cute to watch moving around. And just for reference, like this is Java moss, right? So this is a very zoomed in picture. Here's another video. There's two over here, so if you guys take a look. Oh, and then we got another one coming through. Yeah. Okay, so free swimming fry. Here's a 2-week-old fry. Here's a 1-week-old. You see the 1 week can barely swim. It's not very good at swimming yet, but the 2 week is ready. Is it can right itself. It can swim forward, swim backwards. But the 1 week ones are sometimes they look weak, but it's just part of their development. Kind of talked about this already. And at 3 weeks, boom, you finally have the nice little blue streak developing. It starts from the head, moves towards the body. So if you guys look at this one, there's another one back here that's a little bit younger, also full of baby brine shrimp. So once I play this video, you'll see all this green, orange stuff is baby brine shrimp. You'll see some detritus worms down here crawling around. But this guy, he doesn't do much other than kind of just gasp for water. But I sit here and just look at him for 30 minutes to an hour each time, just watching him do this. It's really, really, really cool. All right, so this is around 4 weeks, 5 weeks old. The stripe has sort of fully developed now. It takes them a really long time to develop the full redness of the bottom side. So you'll kind of see like a pale red, pinkish, transparent red for a very, very long time. Again, this guy's full of baby brine shrimp. And at 2 months old, this is the Emperor Tetra that I showed you guys earlier. I have them all growing out in the same tank at this point. This is the time where I start moving them into the community tank parameters. So then I'm not worried about the peat moss. I'm not worried about soft water anymore. I'm just putting them into whatever community tank water that I have, that the adults are in. 3 months old. So I've got your comparison, the size comparisons. All, how many is that? All 6 of these are the babies that I've raised up. On the very bottom here is the female breeders that I have. Now that female is kind of swimming towards the camera, so the size comparison is a little bit off lengthwise. But if you guys look at how tall these guys are, it's almost to the size of the Cardinal breeders. On the right side, we got a female neon tetra down here and a baby Cardinal Tetra. And that's the only time I've ever used gravel, guys. Most of my tanks are planted tanks. Okay, so that was the Cardinal Tetra part. Let's move on to the other different tetras. For this part, same water parameters, same way of raising up the babies. So we've got your green neon tetras, the ones that don't really have that red on the bottom. You've got your neon tetras and your rummy nose tetras. Now, there's a couple of different species of rummy nose tetras. I like the Blairii because if you guys look at this picture down here, the red extends all the way past their head. It's almost like winged eyeliner. And I really like the Blairii, so I like to breed this species. So talking about green neon tetras, they're spawned basically exactly the same way as the cardinals. They are smaller, so it's okay to spawn them in a smaller tank. For cardinals, I do 10 gallons minimum in a group of 10. Green neon tetras, 5 gallon. I still do about a group of 10, 15 they're going to be perfectly fine. They spawn in a group like the Cardinal Tetras do, and they spawn, for me, 5 or 6 days after adding them into the spawning tank. So you'll see the egg is right here. You've got an unfertilized egg, a fertilized egg. Now this in itself, I'll show you guys in a second, but this is a Tupperware container, and because it's in a smaller tank, I don't make that mesh, and this is what I make instead. So I've got your Tupperware on the bottom here, and a piece of that mesh at the top just to stop the adults from getting in. So I'll go ahead and take fishing line, and I'll tie it off on one side to make like a door hinge. On the other, I'll take poke a hole through with that paper clip, and I just clip them into place so that it's flush and it doesn't open up. Again, I have the Java moss on the top with the weight in the middle, and there's no way you guys can see this or anything in here, so I'll do my best to point out what's going on. So we've got your 5-gallon tank. The fish are hiding behind this container as I'm coming up to them trying to take a video, but you've got your heater over here. I keep it nice and warm, same parameters as the Cardinal Tetras, and then I have your spawning container down here. Over here, I've got that lead weight that I was talking about, stopping the moss from drifting around when the fish are diving in there. And then let's move on to the neon tetras. So neon tetras spawn a lot easier than the Cardinal Tetras do. They've been in the hobby for much longer. There's a lot of people spawning neon tetras down in Florida. So they're pair spawners. You have to tell males and females apart. Thankfully, the females are a lot larger than the males. They're also really fat once you get them into condition. They breed at dawn, so instead of breeding at night like the Cardinals do, as soon as that light comes on, a couple hours later, the neon tetras are done breeding. I keep them in a shoebox-sized tank with moss and egg mesh. So this is what it looks like. Over here, I've got your sterilite container. The breeding pair is right here. I submerged this entire thing down in there. So really, they're breeding over just a couple inches of water. I also have a flashlight down here just for candling the eggs. And here are the eggs. So you won't, these little big round things are not the eggs. They are fishing weights that I put into the container to let that container sit at the bottom. But if you zoom in, here are your neon tetra eggs. They're almost impossible to see, even in person. So what I'll do is I'll shake that container just a little bit, agitate the water, get a little bit of current floating, and then those eggs are kind of wobbling around at the bottom so you can really see it, especially if you have light coming off from the side or at the very bottom. And then lastly, my rummy nose tetras are probably my favorite ones out of all the different tetras that I breed. And that's because the way they breed is just like completely different. We're not talking about moss anymore. We're not talking about mesh or egg mesh or anything like that. First of all, let's talk about the rummy nose tetras. The females are here. The males is over here. Males are thinner, just like any of the other tetras. The females have that nice belly after conditioning. But this is my rummy nose tetra setup. There's no more mesh at the bottom. Instead, I float these catappa leaves at the top. Okay, and if you've ever soaked catappa leaves, you'll notice that they kind of sink after a day or two. So we're taking advantage of that, and I'm creating an incline on this side as the rest of that leaf is now submerged in the water. And same thing over here. This whole area down here is in the water. So I'm creating like a ramp almost. Say this was the leaf and this was the surface level. That leaf will kind of drop down. And at night, the fish will swim onto the surface and deposit their eggs on top of that leaf. So Ryan, how do I keep this thing floating? Because the leaves will just fall into the water, right? So you guys can kind of see this peeking out over here, a little bit of that over here, but it's actually just a little square piece of bubble wrap, and I'll just super glue it to the bottom of that catappa leaf, and I'll float it just like that. You can reuse the catappa leaves multiple times, same water parameters. I've treated this with peat moss. And the only reason why it's a lot darker than the pictures that I took of the Cardinal Tetras is because I let that peat moss sit there for a lot longer, and I've added a little more peat moss, but it doesn't really matter. So this is what the rummy nose tetra eggs look like. They're all on the surface of the water. Over here, you see all of these over here. And they also breed in the middle of the night. So you'll see this in the middle of the night, come back in the morning, and the eggs are ready, waiting for you. You don't have to really wait for dawn or anything like that. Yes?
What species of rummy nose is it?
Blairii. Yeah. And then the other thing, let's go back over here, is I've got this glass container just to stop the evaporation because water is precious here. And then over here, I've also got that cloth. So I'm also covering the entire tank giving them as much privacy as I can. I live a little sliver, like I said before, same conditions as the cardinals. Now these guys also take a couple of days to spawn. So you want to put them in there, let them get comfortable. You can still feed them. And during this time, you're just really monitoring, make sure you have no deaths in the tank. And then they'll breed for you after about a week. Once I have the eggs from the rummy-nosed tetras, what I've done is set up one of those fluval hang on the outside breeder boxes that you can run an airline through, and it will continuously give you a nice stream of water. And so and this is a video, so I'll play this in a second, but pay attention to the bottom here. All those eggs are deposited down there. I take a toothbrush and I just brush those eggs off from the surface of the leaf down into this breeding box, and then I put the leaf right back. I feed them well, and they can keep going for a couple of weeks. And so all of these are eggs down here. Yeah. Okay, so one thing to note for the rummy-nosed tetras, unlike the cardinal tetras, they take a little bit more than a day to hatch out. It doesn't really change anything, but their development is a little bit longer than the cardinals, probably about a day and a half, 2 days before you'll really notice any hatching. So thank you guys. That was it for this presentation. I really appreciate everyone coming around. And yeah. I've got some FAQs over here, but I'll also take some questions. So if you guys want to just raise your hand. And yeah.
What are the batch sizes of these fish?
The batch sizes, so like.
How many eggs are you?
So in a group of 10 fish, let's say, I get about 10 to 30 eggs per spawn. So every day I'll come down, I'll see 10 to 30 days. Sometimes they'll skip a day or two. But overall, it's kind of like perpetual spawning. But after a few weeks, the amount kind of decreases, or we'll just stop spawning for a couple of days. And that's when I move them back into the community tank, give them a break, let the females have some time to build up their eggs, and try again.
So out of a spawning event, you get 300 eggs or something like that?
Yeah, it just depends on how long I keep them in there for. Yeah.
Are you starting everything on 550?
Say that again?
Starting everything on 550 golden pearl?
Golden pearls? Like the fry food? Just regular, like, honestly, I go to Petco and I just buy the Tetra of flake food. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have to do any water changes anytime with the fry?
With the fry? No, so actually the most important part about water changes, and thank you for reminding me, I forgot to tell you guys this, but the water changes happen in the breeding tank, the spawning tank with the adults. Because once you've worked with your hands in the water for a couple times, the minerals and the salts from your hand is going to raise the hardness of that water, right? So after a while, the Cardinal Tetras, and you can see this with your test strips too, it'll start to raise the hardness of that water. So I'll do the water change, but I won't just toss away that water change from the breeding tank. I'll actually put it into the fry tank. So the fry are once they're hatched out, they're a little more resilient. It's really the adults that need that really soft acidic water to breed. So I prepared all that extra water. The water is going into the spawning tank, and the excess spawning tank water is going into the fry tank before they get dumped out. Yeah, thank you. All right, so if there's no other questions, I'm going to end it. Yeah.
So you have all these fish now. What do you do with them?
So this was back in North Carolina when I had a lot more room. So I would either give it off to the Aquarium Society there, the Raleigh Aquarium Society. Most of the time, there's a lot of times if I were to sell cuttings of plants and things like that, people will come and check out my tank and be like, "Ooh, can I have some of those?" But after that, I have to downsize a lot of my tanks to move over here to the area. So most of them were just given away to some friends. Yeah.
How often do you feed your fry?
Every day. Yeah.
Once a day.
Depends on the size of them. If you can get away with once a day, but if you want them to grow like fastest, most healthy, like baby run shrimp, twice a day is fine. Yes.
Life expectancy.
Life expectancy For the adults, I've kept them for 3 or 4 years, no problem. So in the wild, you know, if you think about the high waters, like the rainy season, there's a ton of them, and then they're supposed to like die off. A lot of them dies off once it dries off. But I think when you think about that, I think we suffer from like selection bias, right? A lot of the ones that are left over are left to, we see them alive. So we think that their life expectancy is 1 year, but really they can live for much longer inside a fish tank.
Yeah, in the wild, the annual sort.
Yeah.
They can live longer, but usually it's the young.
Yeah. Yes.
Are they fertile for all of the 3 or 4 years?
Are they fertile for the 3 or 4 years? The young females during the first spawns are usually the most like fertile. So they'll give you the most eggs. And then as they get older, it takes a little bit more coaxing, or like sometimes they just won't spawn. So there's definitely like a drop off or decline, but I don't think it's very noticeable for the first few months of the breeding. Like you can do this multiple times and you see the babies. Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, thank you guys so much.